Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Everyone Outreach. My name is Pastor Eric Recker, and I currently serve actually on your behalf. I serve as the WELS Director of Evangelism. So my full-time job is to try to help WELS members and congregations to reach out to the lost. I'm thrilled to be with you. I am joined by Pastor Matt Holtz in the back. He's going to be another one of our facilitators. And Pastor Adam Zimpelman. Adam, stand up, please. You might know that name, Zimpelman, here at Christ. We are thrilled to be with you this weekend, and it's a beautiful day for Everyone Outreach. So the Lord has given us just a perfect day for this. I know that it's a big ask. 8 hours over a weekend is a lot of time, so I really appreciate you being here. We pray this will be a blessing for you, and I'm fairly confident that you're going to have a lot of fun while you're here. That's the way we've designed it. You can see that the program is called Everyone Outreach, and the tagline is building a congregational outreach culture. So, I'm going to ask you to turn to the person next to you and discuss the following question. Turn to the person next to you and discuss this question. What is outreach? Go ahead and discuss, please. Thank you for that conversation. Wrap those up and turn back to me, please. I'm curious what you discussed. What is outreach? Who will share something that you discussed? Who will share? What is outreach? Please. Anything you can do to help one another. Thank you. Who else will share? Please. Paul.
Active reaching out beyond the church to involve somebody in your life as opposed to just passively living it.
Actively. Say it again, that last part.
As opposed to passively living your life.
So you're going outside the church and engaging people, instead of just passively letting it happen. Awesome. Thank you. Please. Inviting. Awesome. Who else will share? What is outreach? Please.
Reaching out in friendship to people that are having a hard time with illness.
Reaching out to someone who might be going through a difficult time. Awesome. Thank you. Please.
Building relationships with people. We're focused today on the church, but it could be in your neighborhood, it could be wherever, in your place of employment, where you're just trying to, make that connection.
Okay.
Kind of hear their story.
Connecting with others, and you said something important, hearing their story, listening to them. So all awesome answers. I think all of that has to do with outreach. Here's the definition we use in Everyone Outreach. Outreach is connecting with the lost with the goal of connecting them to the gospel. Connecting with the lost. And you said it. You had some great examples, right? It could be at work. Could be someone who's hurting and needs help. Could be, and it's an active kind of thing, right? Paul said you get out there. So you're just making connections with people who are outside the church, but with the goal that you find a way to connect them to the gospel. All right, so as good Lutherans, we want to define terms, and we've done a pretty good job of that with outreach. Now I'll throw you a little bit of a curveball and turn to the person next to you and discuss this question. How is outreach different from evangelism? Turn to the person next to you and discuss, please. Okay, thank you for those conversations. Let's wrap those up and turn back to the group. I'm curious what you discussed. How is outreach different from evangelism? Who'll share? Please.
We had talked about how outreach was like a broader topic, but then evangelism is like a specific part of that.
Outreach is the broader topic. Evangelism is a specific part of it. Okay, cool. Who else will share? How is outreach different from evangelism? Please. Ooh, outreach is connecting. Doesn't necessarily have to be a religious connection, just a connection. Okay, cool. Who else will share? Please.
Outreach is the action, evangelism is what we're trying to act on, the gospel.
Outreach is the action, evangelism is what you're acting on, it's the gospel. Very cool. Thank you. Who else will share? How's outreach different from evangelism? Some great thoughts already. Please.
Technically, in a group like this, you defined outreach as we're a point of contact to connect people to the gospel. Evangelism is the preaching and speaking using the gospel as our tool. So our tool is evangelism to do outreach.
Ah.
If we define outreach the way you define it. If we're just simply trying to be a friendly church that says hi to people, they have nothing to do with each other. But that wasn't how this started. It started as there's a big connection there.
Okay.
So that's how I would hear it.
Okay, so if we use the definition that we used earlier for outreach, then outreach is making connections, evangelism is the proclamation of the gospel. Very cool. I saw another hand. I thought I saw one other hand. Who will share? I think very interesting distinctions that you made. Here's how I would distinguish the two. Connecting with the lost is the outreach part. Making a relationship or making the community aware of your congregation, for example. It's connecting them to the gospel. That's the evangelism part, right? The word evangelism comes from a Greek word, euangelion. Euangelion. Angelion is the Greek word for angel. Angelion. Does anyone remember from their catechism days, what does the word angel actually mean? Messenger. There we go. Good. We went through catechism. Messenger. So angelion is message, and when you put oi in front of a Greek word, that means it's good. So it's the good message. And so the distinction we would make between outreach and evangelism is that outreach is simply making connections with people. That won't save anyone, though, right? That's loving, and it can be wonderful for them, but it's not going to save them. We also need to connect them to the gospel. So we want not only outreach going on, but certainly we want evangelism going on. All right, you're doing great, and we're defining terms. Now remember, this program is about building a congregational outreach culture. So guess what I'm going to have you do next? Turn to the person next to you and discuss this question. What is culture? What is organizational culture? Go ahead and discuss with the person next to you. All right, thank you for those conversations. Let's turn back to the group. By the way, so awesome that so many of you are here. This might be the largest percentage of people of any congregation that I've been to for Everyone Outreach. So give yourself a round of applause. I meant to mention that earlier. When I was a kid, we didn't clap in church, but we're gonna let that go. All right, what is is that part of our culture? Very good, very good. What did you discuss? What is culture? Who will share? What is organizational? There we go, over there, please. A state of being.
Yeah, we're in a cancel culture right now.
Okay.
And this cancel culture is pervading our traditions, which is also part of our culture. Okay, but we have another culture trying to invade that culture. So that's my statement.
So a state of being, in this case, we're talking about a national culture, you might say. Okay, cool. Who else will share? Please, what is culture?
Community norms.
Community norms. Very cool. Please.
Value system.
A value system. Okay. Who else will share? Please. Tim.
Sociology background, a shared learned behavior of the group.
A shared learned behavior of the group. Cool. Who else will share? What is culture, please?
Similar to like an ethic, you know,
Okay.
how you approach, you know, we were talking about a work ethic, how you approach work, you know, and the culture of how you approach visitors, spreading the gospel, those kind of things. Just how you
An ethic. Yeah. Values. Okay. Cool. Please, Pastor.
Unspoken, all these things that are, we don't necessarily say them, we just know them.
We don't necessarily say them, we just know them. Okay. Many of the things that have been mentioned aren't really spoken, they just are. That goes back to the state of being, I think, that was mentioned earlier. Cool. These are some of the answers that we often hear in our workshops. How we do things here. How we do things here. Shared assumptions, right? Or even values. Someone mentioned values. Simple as that, values. Or it could be as broad as our vibe. You had a vibe here this morning when I came and went into the entryway there. There was a certain vibe to it. And you've sensed that, right? When you go to visit a church or go to some other group event, there is a certain vibe. The truth is, if you want to start an argument, you go into a room of culture-shaping experts and ask them to define culture. And there will be an argument. There is no perfect definition for culture. Here's one, though, that Ed Schein came up with. He was kind of a leader in this decades ago. He started this idea of studying culture. And this is his definition. Culture is a pattern of shared basic assumptions that the group has learned as it solves its problems of external adaptation and internal integration that has worked well enough to be considered valid and, therefore, to be taught to new members as the correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to those problems. Now, I didn't hear any of you say that exactly. Would have been great if you did. It's a little academic, but if we break it down, it starts to make some sense, I think. So these are shared basic assumptions. And notice that's shared. So each person in the group is individual, but they have shared assumptions. And it has learned these assumptions as, in its history, it solved problems. That's how those assumptions got learned. And whatever those are have worked well enough that they ought to be taught to new members. That can be either explicitly or implicitly. Either this is how we do this here, or people walk in and just watch it and go, oh, that's how they do that there. So it could be either way. And, by the way, these are the correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to those problems. Right? It's not an optional way. This is the correct way. Anyone who's been a member of a church for more than a week knows this is the case, right? But it's not just churches, it's really any group. Someone mentioned earlier a work environment, right? Same thing happens there. So that's a little bit wordy for our purposes. It's helpful, but it's a little wordy. So this is the definition we use in Everyone Outreach for culture. The shared thought habits that frame the way people behave and work together. So notice these are shared, and notice that they're thought habits. A thought habit is your default position. It's what you go to. So something comes up and you just, that's where your thoughts go. And it frames the way people behave and work together. What comes to mind when you hear that word frame? What comes to mind when you hear the word frame? Please. Structure. So there's a frame to this building that we're in right now. You probably saw it going up over the last couple of years, right? That frame holds the whole thing up, even though most of the time it's mostly hidden. You don't see it, but it's very, very important. Culture is like that. It's like a frame. It's usually hidden. These are hidden thought habits, but it holds up who we are and what we do. Cool. Any other idea? What comes to your mind when you hear frame? Is there another kind of frame that comes to mind? Please. Rules that frame, right? That frame who we are and what we do. Cool. Other ideas, please. A picture frame. You see picture frame on the wall. What's the job of a picture frame? It displays the picture, but it has a particular purpose in displaying the picture. Jerry. It defines the borders. It focuses your attention on that picture, right? And cultures like that too. Cultures like a frame around us. We like being in here. We don't like being out there. Outside is not good. We're not comfortable outside. That's also a way that culture works. So you've done a great job now. We've defined outreach and we've defined culture. So it's time to get a little bit of physical mobility, and we're going to have you do an exercise. Before I explain what this exercise is, it's a little bit physical. It's not super physical, but if you have a hard time getting around or a hard time, like if you have bad shoulder injury, for example, it's okay if you sit it out and just observe. But for those of you who are willing and able to participate, please, everybody stand up. And I'm going to ask you to move into the aisles. Go somewhere that you've got a little bit of room. I'm going to ask Pastor Holtz to come up by me. And you're going to, first of all, you're going to need a partner about your height, roughly. Roughly. Doesn't have to be exact, but roughly your height. Not everyone's the perfect height of 5'5". I understand that. Raise your hand if you do not have a partner. Each person needs a partner. I see a group of 3 there. We need twosomes, not we need dyads, not triads. Raise your hand if you do not have a partner. We have one that does not. Pastor, or Dan, if you would. Awesome. And go to a spot where you can see me, Pastor Holtz and me. We are going to play a game, and you're going to need a little bit more room, so let's spread out a little bit further. Come on up and spread out a little bit. Okay, we are going to play a game, and the goal of this exercise is to score as many points as possible. So face your partner. I'd like you to put the outside of your right foot to the outside of their foot. Outside to outside. Right foot, outside. If you're inside, it's wrong. We want outside. Inside is right, or outside is right, inside is wrong. Outside to outside. How are we doing? Looks good? Looks good. I'm proud of you. Well done. Now, if you would please raise your right hand. Grasp your partner's right hand thusly. Do not interlock fingers. Nothing good can happen by interlocking fingers. Thusly. Okay? Bring those hands down to shoulder height, please. Okay? Now, the goal of the game is to score as many points as possible, and this is how you score points. I score a point if the back of my hand touches his shoulder. He scores a point if the back of his hand touches my shoulder. The goal is to get as many points as possible. Ready? Go. And stop. Stop. Thank you. All right. Very interesting. Raise your hand. I saw lots of different activities going on. So, raise your hand if you got 0 points. I was in that group when I played this game the first time. Raise your hand if you got 5 or fewer points. 5 or more points. Let's go 5 or more. 5 or more, raise your hand. Keep them up if you got 10 or more. 15 or more. 20 or more. 25 or more. Wow, thank you. You can put your hands down. Very, very interesting. Everyone can take their seats except the 2 of you. If you would come up here, please. Tim, and get your partner. Dave, you've been drafted. And could you come up with your partner as well? Professor Lang, if you'd come over here, please, with your partner. Doug's fine? Okay. So, I saw very different results in that activity. And I think that's because there were different behaviors in that activity. So I would like Tim and Dave, if you'd face each other and reenact your playing of the game. There we go. That's about it. Okay, cool. Would the 2 of you reenact your playing of the game, please? Go. Okay, so very interesting. Now, the same instructions were given to everyone. Very different results because of very different behaviors. And I'm going to suggest the reason that those behaviors were different is because there were different thoughts that were had. What were you thinking when you played the game? Especially about your opponent.
competition between people than it was cooperation.
It's a competition between us, and I've got to fight to get my hand. What were you thinking?
I thought it was cooperation.
I thought it was cooperation.
The first 5 seconds, we were kind of
We
trying
were
to
kind
punch
of
each other, and it's
trying
like,
to
oh,
figure-
this
no.
is...
Now, notice a couple of things. I gave the same instructions to everyone. I did not say whether it was cooperation or competition. I just said the goal was to score as many points as possible.
That's competition, baby, bring it.
And understood. That's why I got 0 the first time I played it. I didn't give you much time to think about it, right? I said, here's how you play the game, ready, set, go, which is intentional so that the thought habits are what would show up. You didn't really have time to think it through. You just did what your thought habit was. But the point is, there's not a right or wrong to this game, by the way. The point is simply this. Our thought habits, whatever they are, show up in our behaviors. And those behaviors then have certain results. Thank you. Round of applause for our volunteers, voluntold. This little diagram is really a summary of what this whole weekend's about. This whole weekend is about helping you as an individual and you as a group discover what kind of thought habits do we have. And we're going to ask some questions and do a lot of discuss. You're going to do most of the work, by the way, just so you know. We're the lazy ones here today. You guys are going to do most of the work. We're going to do exercises like that and ask questions that get you discussing who are we? What are our thought habits? And some of those are good for outreach, and some of those are not so good for outreach. But we're here to discover what they are. And it shouldn't surprise us, really, that thoughts are really important and powerful things, because the Bible says that too. In Proverbs 4:23, now, when he talks about guarding your heart, remember the heart in Old Testament thinking was the seat of emotions and thought. So basically he's saying guard how you think. What does he say there about the importance of our thoughts? Please. Everything you do flows from it. It's absolutely critical because the way I think leads to the way I behave. And what's the good news in this second passage? Paul talks about it in Romans 12, and he says something is possible when it comes to the way that we think, and this is the good news. What does he say? What's the good news there? Please.
You'll be transformed.
Okay. You can be transformed. Your thinking can actually change. Now, God has made you a certain way, a certain person with a certain personality. Some of those things aren't going to change because that's the way He wants them to be. But Paul himself says, we can be transformed in the renewing of our mind. We can begin thinking differently. So if there are some thought habits that you have as an individual or that you have as a group, if you have some thought habits that are not good for reaching the lost, they get in the way of reaching the lost, the good news is, hey, those can be changed. All right. So, just a reminder of our definition of culture and what we call those results precursors. My partner in creating this is named Kurt Nitz, and he's a chemical engineer by training, so he comes up with terms that I would never use, like results precursors. Turn to the person next to you and discuss this question. True or false, our congregation has an outreach culture. Go ahead and discuss. All right, thank you for those conversations. Let's wrap them up. And when you're finished, we'll turn back to the group. I'm curious what you discussed. True or false, our congregation has an outreach culture. Who will share, please?
We do. It's much better than it used to be.
Okay.
It can be even better.
Better than it used to be, can be even better. Awesome, please.
It's always true, and it's a universal truth because every church has a culture, good, bad, or indifferent.
Oh. It's absolutely true because the fact is every congregation has an outreach culture. May not be good, but it is an outreach culture. Very insightful. Doug?
This congregation we've just joined 3-4 months ago.
Okay.
you happen to one time make a mistake with the second service, then you really don't know who you are.
Yeah. The
Little
o-
things that I know that cause congregations all kinds of framing problems. We now have these up here. When we first got here this summer, we had to have a vote if we could have those.
Mhm.
But some people don't want that. They don't want, but when I'm holding a grandkid, I want that. I want it. And if you don't like me because of that, tough. It's an outreach culture though. It really is. This right here is an outreach culture. This is pretty good. But it could be better.
Thank you. We're going to see this. We got 8 hours to run this experiment. We're going to see if we can get Doug to share with us what he's thinking. That's great. And one of the real blessings I've seen in these workshops is most of the time there are members who've been a long time member and there are members who are new. And it's really cool to just hear what their perspectives are on a whole bunch of different things. So thank you very much. All right. How about this one? Oh, is it? Please.
My wife and I say 50-50.
Okay.
50% are outreach and 50% just want to come and be at church. Part of the history though of Eagle River is reaching out because they have people that didn't know about snowmobiling, so they reach out about snowmobiling or about hockey or whatever. So the history is more reaching out. People reacted to that through the years, sometimes negative, sometimes not.
Okay.
But I've always try to see the new person that's there and talk to them.
So that's interesting. The community itself is needed outreach because of these things that people didn't know about.
They were up in the Northwoods.
Yeah, very, very.
Things to bring people in.
Yeah, very interesting. Cool. How about this one? Turn to the person next to you, discuss this. Because what's the good news and bad news in this statement? Our outreach is a product of our shared thought habits. Good news and bad news in that statement. Turn to the person next to you and discuss. Okay, thank you for sharing. Let's wrap up those conversations. We'll turn back to the group. Curious what you discussed. What's the good news and bad news in that statement? Who will share? Please.
So, we were sort of in line with the NIPS's in terms of there's a mixed, because of the individuals, there's a mixed view. Could be apathy or a lot of excitement about outreach. So then, if you have these various opinions and or thought processes, then what makes the culture? You just have a mixed culture.
Ah.
So I think that's where we're at, is that we sort of have some people don't seem to care and others seem to be on fire about it.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Please.
I just want to build off what Dan was saying with the word shared. If we're not all on the same page, it's kind of hard to accomplish something.
If we're not all on the same page, hard to accomplish something because it's not shared. Cool. Please.
The good news is our outreach is a product. The bad news is it's based on our shared thoughts and habits.
Okay. The good news is it's a product. The bad news is it's based on our thought habits. Okay. Please.
The good news is that we all want evangelism and outreach. We all want it because we've been trained in what the Bible says. But the bad news is we don't quite know how to do it. We all have different personalities, and so we don't all approach it the same way.
Okay. Thank you. Please.
Well, the good news is kind of like, even though we don't all approach it the same way, with the entire community, the outside of it, they're all different as well, so not one approach would work for every single one.
Oh, okay. They're different too. There's different people out there. Cool. Okay, awesome. How about this one? One more. What excites you about building your congregation's outreach culture? Who will share? What excites you about building your congregation's outreach culture? What do you think? Please, Pastor.
Because when you see Christ actually
Thank you. Who else will share? I'm sorry? Supports the Great Commission. Cool. Others, please. Sharing the gospel. What could be more exciting? Right? It's the good news. Okay, very cool. Awesome job so far. Before we let you go, and what we're going to do is hour 1 is in here, hours 2 through 7, you'll be in individual rooms. We're splitting you out into different rooms. The reason for that is more people get to talk and in smaller groups. So we're going to split you into 3 different rooms for 2 through 7, and then our last session tomorrow will come back here to wrap up. Okay? But before we send you to your individual rooms, just want to give you a little framework for this weekend and what it is that we're doing. This whole program started about 5 years ago, when I began serving as the director of evangelism. And when I looked at WELS congregations that seemed really blessed in evangelism, the common thread that I saw is they all had an outreach culture. It's just kind of who they were. And I, of course, had zero idea how to make that happen. But the Lord introduced me to, not directly, but indirectly, the Lord introduced me to Kurt Nitz, who is a semi-retired culture shaping consultant. So he goes all over the world helping huge companies shape their culture. And he gave a presentation at the Synod office building one day, and I cornered him and said, "Hey, think you could help me with this?" And he said, "Sure." I said, "Well, I've got a presentation I put together that I did at one congregation. It was about a 3-hour presentation. Would you look at it?" And he said, "Yeah, send it to me." So I sent it to him. He called me back, and he said, the first thing I want you to know is you've got really clear direction in this, and the second thing is this won't work." And I said, "I know. That's why I need you." And I knew that even after I did the first 3-hour session, it wasn't going to make any difference. It was interesting, we had a good time, but it really wasn't set up right. So he worked with me, and one of the few blessings, I suppose, that came out of coronavirus is we were in lockdown, and that meant Kurt couldn't work. So we spent months on Zoom developing Everyone Outreach, and so it fast-tracked it. It would never have happened if he hadn't been locked down. But one of the things he pointed out is that what I had originally put together had very clear from-tos. And I said, "Okay, great. What's a from-to?" He said, "It's what kind of thinking are you trying to go from to? What kind of thoughts are you trying to change?" And these were 5 that the Commission on Evangelism came up with, kind of thought habits we thought often get in the way of congregations having an outreach culture, and they are going to be the outline for our weekend. So let me share those with you. The first one is going from an over-there outreach mindset to a we-me outreach mindset. Over-there outreach is sending missionaries around the country, sending missionaries around the world. Over-there outreach is the pastor being a great evangelist. I am thoroughly convinced that the people of the Wisconsin Synod truly want the gospel proclaimed. They really want people to know Jesus, and that's not surprising. We have Jesus in our heart. That is something we want to have happen. I'm almost equally convinced that many of us in the WELS love it when the gospel is proclaimed by someone else. We love it when the gospel is proclaimed by someone else. And I will put myself in that category when I was growing up as well. If the pastor did it great, the evangelism team, the missionaries, that was awesome. I didn't see it as my role until I was 26 years old. Any idea why suddenly I saw it as my role? I became a pastor, and that's what pastors do. So we want to go from thinking other people do outreach to I do outreach. It's part of what I do. Second one is going from reluctant or resistant to change to joyfully embracing change as needed to reach the lost. Now, this one you have to be careful. It doesn't say change for change's sake, right? It says if there's a change that needs to happen in order to reach the lost, if that's accurate, not only am I going to be okay with it, I will joyfully embrace it because people are going to hear about Jesus. Rather than, I don't care if more people hear about Jesus, I don't want this to change. That would be the from. And by the way, we do not tell you a single thing to change this weekend. We don't tell you. Because we don't know you. We don't know your culture. We don't know your situation. You might think of some things that might need to change, but we're not here to tell you what to change. Thirdly, going from hesitant to reach out to compelled to reach out. This could be on an individual basis where someone says, I can't do outreach, I'm an introvert. Going from that thinking to, I'm going to do outreach, even if I am an introvert. It can happen as a group, too. A church might say, well, we can't do outreach until we build a new building. Instead, we want them thinking, we're going to do outreach, even though our building isn't the greatest. Fourthly, outreach may happen to outreach is intentional. That's pretty self-explanatory. Rather than we hope it happens, we're going to make it happen. And then fifthly, it's probably the most subtle one, going from all are welcome to all are welcomed. All are welcome is the doors are open on Sunday, we put our service times outside, anyone's welcome to walk in, someone might even say good morning. That's all are welcome. We're not going to kick you out. We're not going to keep you out. All are welcomed is we are going to do everything in our power to make a new person feel like part of us as soon as possible. Do you see the difference? So we're going to spend about an hour on each of these. Actually, one of them gets 2 hours. That's why there's 6 middle hours. And we'll just walk through these and discuss them and see what thought habits you might discover. Any questions on these before we move on? Okay, so that's the basic outline. So the premise of our workshop is this, that collective thought habits are often unconscious and invisible. It's just a reality that many times the way we think is hidden to us as an individual and as a group. And so our hope this weekend is really to use an insight-based learning model so that you discover your own thought habits. Insight-based learning means you're going to discover it, we're not going to tell you. We can't tell you because we don't know what your culture is. So each hour we're going to do basically the same thing, each hour of the workshop. We're going to do an experience, something like that arm wrestle exercise, something like that. We'll do an experience of some kind. And then we'll reflect on it and share, do a lot of sharing. We'll ground it in God's Word and then relate it to congregational outreach. So it's very interactive, it's very active, and the time tends to go pretty quickly, I think. And you learn a lot about yourself and you learn a lot about your fellow members of your congregation. At the end of each section, you're going to write I will statements, and these are going to be important. We'll give you some time to quietly reflect on what we just discussed that hour, and then you'll jot down in your journal, what will I do differently going forward to change my thought habit in this area? And at the end of the workshop tomorrow, you're going to pick 2 or 3 of those that you wrote all weekend. And those are the 2 or 3 you're going to work on going forward in the coming months. Now, why do we have you pick 2 or 3 and not do all of them? Why not just do all of them? Yeah, it'd be too overwhelming. You probably wouldn't do any of them. So the best way to get really good I will statements at the end of the workshop, those 2 or 3, the best way to get good ones is have lots of them. So when you get that journaling time and time to write your I wills, just write as many as you can, because at the end you'll be able to weed out the ones that don't strike you anyway. All right? So you've done an awesome job. Congratulations. It is break time, and this time break time means walking to the room that you're assigned to.